In the after lunch break, I know everybody gets a little tired, so we're going to do just a quick little exercise in futility because we have these little, well, I have one on too, these little TypeScript Angular shirts, just for fun, just for fun. Now, unfortunately, I could only haul so many in my little carry-on, but so who wants a TypeScript? We got a, oh, that sucked. There you go. We got one more, one more. That was pretty good.
I like the shirt, though. Where'd you get that?
We had them made up. Yeah.
You had them. You make one for me?
We would look pretty geeky, man.
Well, right. This is the place to start fashion with a bunch of developers, right?
Well, yes. We are very fashionable here. So, all right. Well, my name is Wahlin, and this is my good buddy
Andrew Connell. How's that, buddy?
Oh, that was weak. How's everybody? You're real good.
Yeah.
Real good. All right. So we only got about 20 minutes, so we're going to jump in and talk about TypeScript and Angular and ES6 and a little bit of that. So the overall agenda for us is going to drive a lot of code. You can run off to GitHub if you're interested. I'll show this at the end as well. Yes, Vanna, will you please? There you go. So we're going to be going through these demos, and we're going to basically talk about, how do we write it today, which everybody knows with JavaScript and things, but then we're going to compare it to how could you do it with TypeScript, and we're going to talk about some TypeScript features along the way.
The last demo, too, big, like, soup to nuts demo that we did that you can go ahead and grab. The first two ones are really simple, just to kind of show off the language and the compare and contrast. But the last demo, that's big, real-world kind of a thing that we'll also touch on a little bit in here, but you guys can go grab it.
Exactly.
Yep.
So here's kind of the agenda. We don't actually have many slides, but we tried to be organized and at least look that way. So we'll jump in. All right, so let's talk about why TypeScript. So kick us off here.
All right, so why TypeScript? So the whole idea behind TypeScript, it's a superset of JavaScript that's supposed to make our lives easier in maintaining more enterprise-level applications, enterprise-level and enterprise-scale type JavaScript-based applications. So giving us a lot of different things. Like we saw a little bit of the stuff this morning about like strongly typed classes and stuff. But that's the big piece. It's you write JavaScript, it is valid TypeScript.
And that's one of my favorite features.
Yes.
You can actually take your JavaScript today, plug it in. In fact, we're going to do that in a sec, and it just runs. So it's also very modular. So those that have played, how many played with ES6 features in here? Just so I know. All right,
that's a good number.
Fair number of you. How many have actually done TypeScript in here?
There we go.
Okay, cool. One of the things in JavaScript, you can certainly do modularity if you kind of know what you're doing there. But with TypeScript, it's definitely a lot easier in ES6 in general. So tomorrow they'll be having more talks on this, and we're not going to go into that today too much, but it is very modular that way.
Yeah. Another thing, too, is helps you build a scalable application structure. So you want to organize your project in different ways. It's very flexible. It's not terribly opinionated. So you can choose how you want to lay out your project. You'll see that I'll show you some stuff that we've done with Grunt, or with Gulp, not with Grunt. And to use the types that we've defined in some TypeScript files, to be able to leverage them in other files very easily. So give you a little tips on the organization stuff as we move through this.
How many are building like really big JavaScript apps right now? As in many, many, many thousands of lines of code. All right, well, you all know that unit tests are great and we should all have them, of course. But it's pretty easy to accidentally mix up types and screw things up without realizing it, unless you have some really good tests to back it up. Hopefully you do. Well, you're going to see that we do have strong typing. So we can do things like numbers and strings and arrays and actually type our variables if you want. You don't have to. You don't have to. And you can even do custom types we'll talk about.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a big point, too, is you want to make sure that you're going to see a lot of stuff that you can do with TypeScript, but you don't have to do everything with TypeScript. You can just take advantage of some of the stuff. If you just want the static types or the more strong typing, then you can just take advantage of that and get that benefit. The tooling support also very robust with TypeScript. All the big editors support it, from like the WebStorms to brackets. Everybody's got plugins and stuff that help support it, as well as with linting tools, TS-lint and stuff. And we'll show it to you how we're doing it inside WebStorm and how we actually we're going to show you 3 different editors actually: Sublime, Brackets, and WebStorm.
And then the final piece here is that, and it was announced today when Jonathan came up, that the feature parity with ES6 and TypeScript, especially with 1.5 coming out. 1.4 is what we're on today right here. But awesome support for ES6 And so it provides a great migration strategy, I think, if you're ready to jump to ES6, because you could always do ES6 and do a goal per grunt, you know, and do ES5. But by doing this, it's really easy. It's things like classes and modules we're going to talk about here in a moment. They've been supported for a long time. It works well.
You know, Dan and I, when we were putting the session together, we kind of one little thing that we were going to talk about was, you know, asking each other, so what's the most important thing, or what's the biggest thing that you like about TypeScript? And of course, we both had the same answer, right?
I don't remember. What did I say back then? My answer, now that we're in front of our best friends here, is that you can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
You can do as little or as much as you like.
Well, I mean, for me, it's I'm familiar writing standard ES6 style JavaScript. The ES5 style JavaScript. ES6 style JavaScript, not as familiar with it. But what's cool about it is you get familiar working with like TypeScript. And as TypeScript evolves, and as we get to the point where we can compile down to ES6 and have true ES6, it helps you kind of promote to build your JavaScript, your JavaScript-based solutions today in a much more conformative and future-proofing for ES6. You can just change it when ES6, when all the browsers support it, say don't compile it down to ES5, compile it down to ES6. So it really does promote that working in ES6 today without having to worry about the transpiling of switching from ES6 to ES5.
Exactly. So a quick story on that. So I have some friends at Intel who probably about 2 years ago decided to go TypeScript. You know, at the time we're all talking about it, and I was in on this a little bit on this project initially. And they said, yeah, we're going to go for it and try it. And now, as of today, they're sitting pretty well, I think. So they're like, we're prophetic, you know.
Feels good.
But all right, so a couple of the key features. I'm actually going to show you most of these as we go into a demo here. But so we mentioned strongly typing, modules and classes. You're going to be able to do that if you want. Now, you're going to see coming up, you don't have to. If you want to do just functional programming, you can do functional programming. You don't like to type your stuff, you don't have to type your stuff. So there's a lot of benefits there.
Yeah. The other thing, too, is like we can have interfaces as well. So we can define what our classes and types should look like. It allows us to do things like work with like a little initializer style syntax. So we don't have to new up a new object and then set all the properties. We can actually set the properties when we're actually newing the object up using the interface syntax that we have. Yeah.
So does anyone use generics in here by chance in any languages out there? It's called code templates if you're new to it. You can do that. We're not going to have time to go into that, but you can do that. We've already mentioned modules. You're going to talk about type definition files.
Call it type defs, yep.
It compiles to ES3, ES5, or ES6 now. And then we're going to jump into some of the features. So let's talk about the structure real quick, and I'll show you a quick demo. So you kind of have two roads you can go. Number one, you can do modules. And as I mentioned, when starting with 1.5, they're going to have ES6 style module loading. And then if you want, you can go the class road. It was kind of interesting. I was doing a little thing a while back with TypeScript, and a particular individual who was very influential with it went, well, you can't just show classes because some people want to go the functional programming approach. You can do that too. All right, so let's look at an example, though, because most of you in here have done the functional approach. Let's look at an example here of kind of what we can do with it. So let's start off and say I have my good buddy Andrew. And Andrew is, we'll say, what are you, about 24, give or take.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
And we can do a little, let's just do an ad. Now, everybody knows once you see this, you're going to go, okay, I see where this is going. Because we all know what happens.
So this is the TypeScript playground. You can do this on typescriptlang.org. And where you can type in, you can write TypeScript on the left-hand side, and it does the live compilation down to JavaScript on the right-hand, on the other side. My left and right backwards.
Yeah, whatever side that is.
That's okay. I'm on the other side of the road right now.
And then we could, alert the result. Now, if you look over to the I guess you're right. You'll notice in this case that everything looks the same, but obviously if we run this, what's going to happen?
And we're going to get a runtime issue, or it's going to concatenate a,
in this case, yeah, it's going to concatenate. So one of the nice things if you're new to TypeScript, which is kind of what we're here for, is we could come in and say, no, these are numbers. So you simply put a colon and a type. And now you'll see that name here gives us a nice little error. Argument of type string is basically not assignable to number. Makes sense. If you ever worked with a strongly typed language, you're used to this.
Yep.
All right, now that's kind of the basics of some of the types. And there's others you can do, but you can also do things like this. You could do modules. And let's do a class. All right, now, let's see, what do we have, Andrew?
Name.
Name, yeah. And age. Okay, and these are variables, fields, whatever you want to call them, but they're part of your class. And then if anyone's done ES6, you'll recognize this. We can come in and have a name that can be passed in and an age. It's just going to wrap a little, looks like, but that's all right, which is a number. Let me scroll back over. All right, and then we could assign whatever's passed in to the name and to the age, like that. Now, if you look over to the right, look what's going on. A lot of you will recognize this because you probably do it every day. You know, we're basically namespacing our code there. All right, well, that's pretty cool.
We got a function.
Yeah.
We'll do that in a minute.
We'll add that too. Good idea, good idea. I do have a function just for Andrew. Now, watch what happens, though. If I do ng-conf dot, I don't get anything. And the reason is that I have to mark this class as export. And that's basically going to say that it is available outside of the module. And so we can come in, we can do person, pass in Andrew, pass in, what was your age again, 22?
It was 22. Yeah, we're going to get younger.
Nice.
I like this control.
You know, whatever it is here. Now, you'll notice, though, as we come in, I'm missing the new, yeah, thank you. Minor detail. When you come in here, though, if you look at the right, this is what's being generated. Now, again, you could do ES3, ES5, or ES6. So it's kind of up to you. All right, so to wrap up, you wanted a, what do you want, a function?
Let's do a function.
All right, let's do get real age.
Uh-oh.
All right, and this is going to be something like age plus...
Go ahead. Just watch what it's going to do here.
30, 20.
Oh, that's my coding age. That's about what it feels like.
All right, so anyway, that's what a function looks like. Note that the function keyword is not there. Now, I could still have functions interspersed in different areas, but in this case, that would be an example of a quick look at a class. Now, what if we want to reuse the person?
What if we want to reuse the person? Well, you're going to say
yeah, we can come in. I'll just export it here.
Well, let's create a manager. How's that?
Okay, we'll do a manager, extends, person.
Yep.
And we can even put a constructor. We can put variables. We can do everything. I'm going to, in the interest of time here, I'm going to go ahead and leave it as is. All right, but that is an example. And you'll notice over the right, look what it's using, though. It's just prototyping. You'll see a little an extend function up at the top. And that's actually what it's doing. So, you know, although it looks all fancy and classy and all that, it's just prototypes.
Yep.
All right, so that's a quick look at that area. All right. What do we have next?
Yeah. So let me talk just a little bit about project setup. With the way that we're doing this, you can actually, a lot of the editors will compile the TypeScript down to JavaScript on the fly as you're coding it, give you nice IntelliSense errors that are showing up. What we've done is we've set it up to have a nice gulp task to do all the compilation for us. So if I come over here and take a look at our gulp file, one of the things we've set up here is this, where is it? Compile TS, all right? So what compile TS is going to do is that we have a config file that's actually going to plug in and list all of our TypeScript files. So then we're going to use a gulp plugin that's going to allow us to go compile all the TypeScript down for us. You can see here that it takes a couple parameters like, how do you want to compile this? Do you want to do ES5, ES6? We can also say if we want to do declaration files as well. I'll explain what those are in a second. And then if we want to do any external resolves, you generally want to put this to, or I generally put this to true. Say I don't want to do this. Basically it says don't try and go link up any external files that I may be referencing because I may not have access to all of them at that time. But what we've also done is I've also set it up to where we can use source maps as well. So that whenever I generate my JavaScript, it's also going to generate my source maps. And when I do debugging in the browser, I can set breakpoints on the TypeScript files that are going to show up inside the developer tools. And I'll hit those breakpoints in the developer tools because the browser will just map everything with the nice source maps.
But if you don't run any bugs, you don't need that.
Well, I don't usually have that problem.
Okay, that's good.
This is your gulp file. So the other thing, too, that we have, and you'll see some other tasks in there, too. We've got a linter in there. We've got this thing up there called gen-ts-refs. The code kind of, or the comments explain what that does, but essentially you want to have references to all of your TS files in your other TS files so that they know what the types are. Kind of inject in the signature of those files. What this does is this is a little trick that I'm using a gulp inject trick to generate a file called expenseapp.d.ts, which is a reference to every TS file in my project, so that then when I just jump into one random file here, you'll see that I've got a reference to a type definition file, I'll explain that in a second, and the expense.d.ts. So one of the other things, too, that you can have is that with TypeScript is that sometimes you're working with libraries, or frequently you're working with libraries like Angular, that are not written in TypeScript today, and you don't have the type definition information. You just have the JavaScript. So what the community has done is they've come around and they've built all these different things called type definition files. And you'll see these files named as whatever it is, .d.ts. And what that essentially does is it's really just the signature with all of the strong typing defined inside of that, of the library that you're using. So you can go grab these things. There's a tool called TSD. It's from the Definitely Typed group. Definitely Typed is a community-run effort of where everybody's contributing different type files. TSD is essentially, think of it as like Bower, but for type definition files. And so you can grab those in, and you can even tell it that when you pull them in, that you want to save them. We have here this tsd.json file, so that when I open this up on a new machine, I could just say tsd reinstall, and it pulls them all right back down.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
If you're in a tool that has code help, you'll get, as you hit dot, you'll get lots of code help.
Yep.
So it's pretty awesome.
Cool.
All right, well, to wrap up, what we wanted to show is just a little demo, and then we have a big one that actually hits cloud services and does Azure logins and all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, touches the OneDrive files API and all that
OneDrive, it's actually pretty cool. It's in the GitHub. We'll see time-wise how we're going here, but we wanted to just show a really simple demo. So last year I did a little Angular JS in 20-ish minutes talk, and what we did is up on the GitHub site, I have that version of it in pure JavaScript, but then I converted it, Andrew and I converted it, sorry, I'm very selfish, to TypeScript. And then we also have this very large project, which he was just showing, that is full TypeScript. So let me show you just a quick example here. This would be an example you can see of a controller in kind of regular way. You might vary on your pattern here. But I have a little init, and it calls out to a factory and does its thing. And pretty standard Angular JS.
Yeah, we've all seen this.
Minus different style preferences, of course.
Yeah, 4 spaces, geez, man.
Yeah. This is the TypeScript equivalent. So you can see that my controller is just now a class. My init becomes the constructor. I still can inject. Or if you want to automate that with grunt or gulp or whatever, you can inject in all your dependencies there, if you'd like, for minification. And then I'm still calling into the factory and doing all that fun stuff. And as Andrew was mentioning, you can actually go and set a breakpoint. If you do it in the JavaScript file, your TypeScript file will show up in your breakpoint definition list because of the map, the source map. If you do it in the TypeScript file, it'll just hit your breakpoint. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, if you try and actually hit the breakpoint in the JavaScript, it jumps over and puts it in the equivalent spot in the TypeScript. That's pretty cool.
So let's wrap up finally. You want to just briefly talk about a service?
Yeah, let me show you a service here. So we've got, in this one here, this is our TypeScript service. Actually, let me show you, one of the things that's neat about this one is that 2 things that we haven't really mentioned here. First, in the constructor, you see where we've got this keyword here of private on the $HTTP service that's coming in. What that's essentially going to do is think of it as like a shorthand for creating an internal variable or internal property for this class and marking it as private. So then I'll be able to say, like on line 12 there, where it says this $HTTP, I can reference all those things that are being passed in. I don't have to have separate variables I've created for them. They're all just partly defined there. But the other thing, too, that you can see is I'm actually using the definitely typed type definition for Angular that I've pulled in, and I'm actually saying that $HTTP is of type ng.ihttp service, so that now when I type in $HTTP dot, I get some IntelliSense or some autocomplete help that's going to show me all the different things that are available to me. This is really cool, especially when you're working with like promises and such. If I jump over to our, real briefly, to one of our live services that we have. Let's see, where is that? That is right here. So this is inside of one of the promises that we return back and making a call against one of our APIs. You can see where we're making our call, the $HTTP get, and then right here when I get the results back, we've actually written out our own interface to define what the data looks like when it comes back so that I'm actually getting strong typed and not just some random JSON response. That's hugely helpful in terms of productivity when you're working with this stuff.
Especially on large apps. So, yep. All right, so if you're interested in the code, because we're going to wrap up here, let me give you this link. Well, I had it right there. One more time here. Yep. And so this will be up on GitHub. We have, again, the little versions, and then we have this really big version if you're interested in kind of jumping in. And we didn't do the full-on approach, right?
No.
We did kind of have your cake, eat it too. Not everything has its own little type and all that. You can do as much or as little as you want, and that's what we both really like.
Yep. It was a lot of fun doing it, and actually it feels a lot more productive too.
It actually does. We worked on this one together, so it was pretty cool. So, all right, well, thanks for your time, and definitely check out TypeScript. I think it's very cool.
Yep.
Cool, man. All right, man.